Cooper again. Could we have about 5 minutes to get some slides loaded up and get ourselves coordinated to answer your questions in an orderly manner and come back together? Sure. Thank you, sir. Forward, I guess we can go ahead then. I thought we would first start with the question about the general overview of the construction process, and then we can go into the specific questions you had in those other areas, if that's acceptable. You have slides in front of you. I apologize, the slide that's on the monitor in front of you, you don't have. The reason we've depicted that up is that shows you all of the steps we do in sequence linearly. So these things are all going on simultaneously, and so portions of the right-of-way are beginning to be cleared, and once we make progress, you have portions that are all the way through the process and being restored as you move the pipeline project forward. Occasionally you have to move that whole train around an area if there's a reason. There's a restriction for a species and we can't get into that area at a given time. Equipment move around to another segment and start again. This somewhat helps you understand why we're asking for a variance to have a longer amount of trench open from time to time, because as you see, there's several steps identified together, multiple pieces of equipment that need to be working in different phases. We also have requirements when we go to do the restoration on the moisture content in the soil and the ability to do compaction. So as we go to move forward, if we had a day or so of rain, we have to get that soil dried out before we can start the restoration of the right-of-way. That's key in assuring that the soil we put back is compacted properly and will aid in the process of staying where it needs to prevent future landslides that occur, which are one of the key concerns here. So the packet that you have goes into each of these steps, and I'm going to go through them one at a time. I just wanted to give you an idea of what the entire process looks like as you get going down the right-of-way. And if we can refer to the slides, I'll go through what each of those items are. So you should have slides that are set up in front of you, and the title at the bottom says Construction Sequence Team. The particular slides that you see here were drawn to demonstrate what happens in those areas where we have to construct on a side hill location. The same sequence applies when we're flat on a ridge or we're flat in other areas, but we also wanted to show there is a slight variation in how you manage the spoil pile and the different BMPs when an area is sideways on the slope. So you start out with surveying and getting the right-of-way marked. Our limits of disturbance, which are those temporary right-of-way items that we've talked about, 125 feet, so that we can set up and begin to clear the trees. If you move on to slide 2, then you'll see at this point we've cut the trees. There's 2 ways that we typically do that. One is we do what we call hand felling, where we have crews that go out with chainsaws, just like lumberjacks, and fell the trees over. And then we come back later and mechanically remove them. If we're working in the right terrain and we're working in the right weather conditions, then sometimes we start and go directly to mechanical tree removal. A lot of times we need to work a little earlier in the year for species mitigation, as we have certain species that require us to have that tree removal done before you get to warmer weather. So we'll go in sometimes and do the manual tree felling right away alone, and then come back at a moment in time later and continue the right-of-way preparation. Once we clear the trees off, a couple of key things. At that point, we'll be putting in the diversion barriers on the upper side of the right-of-way to keep clean water from running across the exposed area, and then we'll put our downhill catch management practices to keep any sediment coming off of the right-of-way and moving off of the work area. As you move to slide 3, now we're beginning to actually prepare the right-of-way for construction. The first major action that we do is we segregate the topsoil so that it can go back at the end of the process and provide those rich nutrients to help the grass and the other quickly. So we'll move those off to one side, generally the top side if it's a side hill, and then we seed that and temporarily mulch it to hold it in place while we're doing construction so that rain events limit the amount of that that gets moved around. Slide 4, we start preparing to actually get our trench in place. In these side hill locations, we'll actually build a bench for the equipment to operate on. That's what's depicted there. You see the kind of a tiered area. Again, those areas that we build up that we aren't going to work on, we mulch and seed to help hold them in place. In a flat area, we kind of just crown that up at the side of the right-of-way and work on top of it. As you go on to slide 5, now we actually begin to build the trench. So we take our excavators, we build the trench. There will be a spoil pile of what comes out of the trench that again gets collected. And we seed and mulch that again as all part of these erosion controls. Now we get into one of the key steps. Once we have the trench in place, we'll pull our pipe out. We call it stringing it. We have to lay the pipe, sections of pipe out along the right-of-way. And somewhat the process is almost custom building in that as we've built the trench, there may be areas where we've had a rock feature or we have to make a turn. And so we actually bend the pipe with machinery and or install pre-made fittings. So we have to build the thing to fit the trench that we have been able to excavate. And then once we get the components laid out in the right area, then we start the welding process. That occurs beside the trench. So we weld the non-destructive examination to certify that the welds are properly done corrected. Then we'll coat those welds because we have to remove the factory coating a short distance back from the weld because it gets damaged during the welding process. So we have to put an epoxy coating around those areas to protect it once it's buried. Then we inspect those coatings and we get ready to go to the next slide where we take segments of this that we have completed together and transition it from beside the trench and lower it into the trench in a unit. And these can be, depending upon where we are, could be several hundred feet at a unit. You actually pick it up together with several pieces of equipment, boom it over the trench, lower it in. In the meantime, we've prepared the bottom of the trench to protect the pipe. We've put some soil that doesn't have rocks and other debris in it so the pipe can have a nice firm support underneath it. We'll also be installing the things around it as in this sequence, we'll also do the hydrostatic testing, which fill the pipe with water, raise that pressure up to a prescribed pressure for the first period of time. Once we get the pipe buried, we move on in beginning the restoration process. In case of side hills, the first step we do is the bench that we build the work on, take it apart, restore it back to the areas that are usually out. When we begin to prepare the subsoil to expose, we decompact it so that it will allow vegetation to occur. We go on to step 10. Then we take that topsoil that we've segregated and then we peel back because it's the soil that the plants grow, and we begin to redistribute it across the body in a bit that let us go on to the next step, which is obviously seeding, preparing the right away, not having areas in it where because we want this right away to take rainwater and absorb it for the plants and we want it to cool water because we've got this soil packing in the back. But if it cools water and it's hydrated with slow, that's one of the problems with creates in the city good soil in the terms of this stuff. So this is a key piece for us when we get this back, pack it right, get the soils in place, get the seed and mulch in place, and let the plants restore that area so that we have less likelihood that we get that soil saturation and subsequent soil. Slide 12 is really going with that way I look at it. mulch. At this point, those early controls on the uphill side, we'll begin to remove those because now we're a little bit of water from the right away for those seeds. We do put in a different style of compost filter stock. At this point, we're not talking about huge open areas of dirt. We're talking about a restored right away has seed, has mulch on it. But we still might have some fun on it to adjust our grades. Other seed mixes that are prescribed in our permits in those areas, the outline area, that are basically going to be restored back to use because they were used by us temporarily in our park. And then we get back to the spot where restored right. You may or may not be familiar, but with the FERC governing body, they actually monitor us all the way through this complete restoration. So even though we get done and we go this back, we have to continue to keep all our inspectors in place, monitor the right away, and continue to report to them. We're subject to them coming out and inspecting and validating that we get the restoration of the vegetation before they help let us declare the construction process.
Mr. Chairman, question. Mr. Cooper, how much of the trench is open at any one time? What's the length of segment that you work in? And how long is that? Take everyone to take to get from start to finish that particular section.
As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a sequence. In this case, we're working with the DEQ to ask for that variance to stretch that out a little bit to allow all these pieces of equipment to work. As you can imagine, we have a competing interest in that we minimize the number of places we want to add roads to get there. So the distance between, in addition to the work we're doing, we've got other equipment traveling beside that to move down in the linear right of way. So flatter ground, we may have more than a mile of it. As you get into the slopes, obviously you're worried about being able to manage more water because it has more velocity, so we tend to compact it together. So the variances that we've asked DEQ to approve and look at are the ones that we're trying to manage the efficiency of doing the project, make sure we minimize the amount of risk that we have for erosion. Because one of the challenges of closing the right of way up too quick is that you have the soil at the back. It's not fully settled like it would be in a year or so. If we continue to run over that, we have a much higher risk of creating these areas where we're containing water, in vehicle tracks and other things. That begins the saturation point, in which then we can have other failures. So we really want to get done in an area when we actually put the soil back in the ditch and cover it up. So we can stay away and let nature do her thing and pull these plants up out of the ground and hold the right away in place.
Mr. Chairman, Cooper, what type of mulch do you use to keep the soil in place before the vegetation starts coming out?
Typically, one of the things we do is hydro seed. So it's a mixture of hay, seeds, and nutrients that you would use the blow in the right way that goes into a device, you feed it and project it out into a magnet that's certainly in place. That's the normal process, but it's really effective. What we're allowed to use is cover further in given areas. If we have particular areas where there are restrictions on the plants, we will comply with whatever we need to in terms of seed mix and the mulch that will be in place.
What's been your experience with that in other projects where you've got equipment running over it and heavy rainfall and so on? Is that staying in place?
The short answer is if we go over top of it, can't go back and repair it. Because the right of way is just freshly put in place. So we have to go over top of it with the bulldozer. It's much more likely to get compacted or compacted. That's why we want to get to that point and really be off of the vehicle tractors. We get that whole train moving past it so that we don't have that race quickly do.
Well, that was my next question. Let's say you have an area that's safe or in the corner of the world, and you cut that everything, done everything. How long will it put you in for?
I guess I'm trying to, this is the question where you say how long will we in that given area?
I'm trying to get an idea of how long you have to put when you back and forth over the disturbed area before you're out of there.
In a
just one more question, I guess, this really was where I was trying to go with. Are you gonna have any areas that are going to disturb and not going to be under some sort of active management? In other words, are you gonna clear areas in the area and move on and then come back? Is there anything that we actively manage for stormwater control or sediment control that you do?
Certainly, the tree bearing standpoint, we knock the trees down and then eventually prepare the right of way to start. There will be times where we're going to be out ahead of mainland creek, so there'll be some places where that's up. That's why we have the ES controls, the stormwater management items in place, and the inspection crews to make sure that's being maintained until we get it. That's the question.
But that's the point. You're not going to have any area that's been, did you want to answer the question?
Maybe I'll have 10 questions.
You have a previous statement.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Michael Wolfing. I'm with Bethel Wetlands Solutions. Just for some background, for what I've been actively involved in developing products, ES controls, and stormwater management requirements for the last long time, and the wetland laws the last 20 or so years. So I wanted to just answer that question and get a little bit like help. In the annual standards, we have a requirement that any area that's graded or cleared or disturbed has to be seeded within 7 days. So when there's operations, for example, around the street crossing that gets done, because there's a separate crew doing that, as soon as they're gone, within 7 days max, any areas that they disturb getting there have to be seeded and stabilized. So eventually, when the training that Mr. Cooper was describing, we don't have a problem.
Well, with the BMPs in place as well, or just the city?
Correct, right. Well, the seeding is the last step of this BMP. So already you have the perimeter controls, the clean water diversions, the temporary water bars, and permanent water bars, temporary one of those locations. On top of that, we won't have the bare ground. It has to be seeded and mulched. And the type of seed and mulch depends upon the slope. So in very steep slopes, there's different materials that are approved in Virginia by DEP or VDOT, for example, that are specifically made, manufactured for steeper slopes that have higher erosion capability.
So you wouldn't necessarily not receive some of that.
They can use their newer products, like Curlex now. And Curlex is a little dangerous for some of the opinions for sometimes. Sure. The other thing that you're seeing here on the slide right now is the completed project, and that ties into the stormwater management requirements. And I think from a water quality standpoint, probably the most important thing to realize is that what you're seeing on the Virginia runoff model is a completed area that has a pollution roughly 70% less than what your regulations require. You require pollution measured by phosphorus as a diesel pollutant of 0.41 pounds per year. Depending upon the soil type, we're going to be in the range of 0.1, 0.12, 0.13. So from a water quality standpoint, the main portion of this project, the main pipeline, is way below your requirement. In agricultural areas, it's simply a temporary disturbance, and the agricultural activities continue as they have before. I think that's something to realize. And a couple of the steps here were decompaction of the subsoil, decompaction of the topsoil, so we can get woody growth in that temporary disturbed area. And then to improve habitat, there's pollinator seed mixes specified in the annual standards to improve that habitat. So it's a complete package. And the final step I should mention is that to make sure this happens, they have promulgated in the annual standards a significant number of inspections, inspection requirements, as well as they have actual maintenance crews to make sure that the BMPs are constantly maintained during the construction process. Yeah, that's a couple of years.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few more questions. So can you go back and follow on Heather's question on the length of time that
not a bad thing from an environmental standpoint, but in terms of construction practice, how long I would defer.
Robert Cooper again. I think the 2 to 3 weeks that I've given you is a very good general idea, because we put the controls in place, and then you have to monitor them and maintain them. As you mentioned, we have crews that are going to be there to fix them, so we have an incentive to get in and get out. I'm not trying to be evasive, however, there will be specific things where when you get started in an area, you need to stop for some other condition. So we're going to have to do the seeding, watch that area, move around and come back. That might be a little longer. There's several things that you can run into. You might get down to the point where we get to a species window, in which case then we have to do some sort of a more extensive restoration if we're going to be there for 2 or 3 months. So 2 to 3 weeks from the trenching until we're there working is a pretty good idea. Actually getting the trees off the right way of running when we pull the stumps and get that first point done. There'll be some areas where that step is done for quite a while. We don't have these big open piles of soil that are likely to erode. It's easier to maintain the controls. It's easier to keep the soil where it is until we get there to start that training process that goes on. So I guess I'm trying to break up your question and say, during the actual training, we have lots of equipment there, we have the troops there, that 2 to 3 window, trench open, and trying to get back, that's about right. But we may be out in front of that, with the clearing crews getting rid of the trees and doing the EMPs and putting that stuff in place to prepare for them to come.
Okay, and is that length of time the same within your steep slope areas as it is and the areas that are more flat?
It's not prescribed in a requirement for them we're in terms of a permit. For us, it will be very important to minimize that time because, as we've heard from other speakers, we all know logically, those areas where we're more likely to experience soil erosion, we want to get to the point that we're in a stable soil. So those hillsides, we're going to get in, do them, and get away. One of the challenges that will be is we're going to work up one side and then one down another. So we may have to do some temporary restoration to get to the other side and then do the final completion as we come on.
Thank you. And I have 2 more questions. I appreciate you bearing with me. Do you have a similar schematic for your stream crossings? Is one question. And then the second question is, in the areas of temporary right-of-way, we are restoring these areas. Have you considered planting a variety of different maturity level of trees instead of seedlings, so that you get coverage, the vegetative cover more quickly?
So on the first question, we don't have it with us to present, but DEQ does have both black and white copies, as well as color copies of street crossing details. And I think the key thing there, actually, that's what Mr. Wayne was talking earlier about avoidance. Under Section 441 of the guidelines for avoidance minimization, which is the core incorporated in HY 12's regional conditions, there's a complete avoidance minimization analysis. So we've restricted the right-of-way, and when you're within 50 feet of streets and wetlands, to 75 feet instead of 125. It makes it a little more confined to work with all the specialized equipment that does that. And right here, that will reduce those impacts. We've also looked at all the alternative methods of stream crossing. So then that ties into the plantings. In certain areas where the Fish and Wildlife Service and the project opinion determined that it would be good for the species in the area to get a more rapid growth, there are seedlings in the plants as well. The problem with doing any woody plants besides in the seedlings, so we have a very unique seedlings that has a mixture of shrubs and trees for those areas. You can't get there and water them easily. So when you have larger tower plants, they tend to have an extremely high mortality rate. So we're going to be using a combination of seeding in the hydro seedlings, beyond the grass, plus what we call seed rain, the right next to trees that have trees and shrubs that have seeds as well. So it's a combination of all that. And those
Cooper. Yes, we'll be doing several simultaneously. I'm going to pick a typical number just to give you an idea. We've talked about construction spreads. So think of that as one main line crew working along the way, and then we may have anywhere from 4 to 8 we call crossing crews. And again, part of the idea here is we have many different things that we need to balance here in terms of environmental risk. Several are dealing with various species that may be impacted certain times of the year with these stream crossings. So we'll want to go out and get those jobs done in those windows when we're allowed to work. But as previously described, where they can go do that job, it may be 50 feet long, it may be 200 feet long, depending on the stream width and the embankments around it. So we'll put that pipe in place, and then we'll get to the point where that localized area is restored. And then the boundary of that will be outside of the areas that we need to stay away from for the management practices of the stream crossing. And as the mainline crew comes along, we'll connect and invite them to the place. So there'll be a lot of them going on, but they're still going to be relatively short duration. Do the crossing, we'll finish the crossing, and then the mainline